Hello everyone, welcome to my November 2019 haul video. Welcome back everyone to a brand new haul video. I once again apologize for this taking so damn long to finally get up. Part of it is due to my procrastination and general laziness, and part of it is just me doing a bunch of other things, getting busy and whatnot. But by the time this is up, it'll probably be 2020. But November was a very, very big month for me when it came to getting all kind of things. This is going to be a very movie-heavy centric episode of these haul videos. It was kind of basically a Christmas in November for me when it came to all the things that I got. First of all, let's get to the comic book related items, and there is not much from the month of November. I was only able to get to my local comic book store, I believe, once during the month, so this is pretty much what I picked up. This is X-Men number 2 by Jonathan Hickman. And next up is also a Jonathan Hickman book, and this is New Mutants number 1. Unfortunately, I forgot to pick up my Supergirl number 36, which I believe ends the run from Mark Andreyko. Don't quote me on that, but I still have to go to my local comic book store and hopefully they have a number 36 or find it someplace else. Now transitioning to the bulk of this video, which is the movie portion, this group of Blu-rays that I have here are specifically from Black Friday, as well as Black Friday weekend, and I'll explain that when I get to the specific movies. So first up here is a UHD 4K edition of M. Night Shyamalan's most recent film, and that is Glass. This is the final film in his, I guess you can say, Unbreakable trilogy. This movie came out earlier this year, I believe in January. I did a full review of it on my channel when it came out, so please check that out if you haven't already. Next up is a Blu-ray that I picked up, and this is a movie called 5 Feet Apart. And specifically the reason why I picked this up is because I really like the actress Haley Lu Richardson. I think she is absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen the movie Columbus yet, I highly recommend watching that movie any way you can, whether it's on streaming or whether you buy the Blu-ray, because there's finally a Blu-ray of it now out here in the United States. It is a bit pricey, but the movie is so worth it. She's absolutely fantastic in it, so I'm kind of going to be picking up all of her movies just because I'm that big of a fan. Next up is a film that many of you probably already know of because it's a very popular film, and that is Spider-Man Far From Home. This is the film that came out post-Avengers Endgame, so this is the film that everybody was really jonesing for a new MCU film. They had this one to kind of suffice them until we get into the next phase. And this is also kind of a quasi-sequel to Spider-Man Homecoming, of course starring Tom Holland. I did a review for this film when it came out in theaters as well, so please check that out. Next up is a film by one of my favorite directors in the current realm of the film world, and that is Steve McQueen, and this is a film called Widows. This was a different film than we're used to seeing from Steve McQueen. It's kind of an action drama. It's a really fantastic film, great cast. I believe I did a review for this when it came out in theaters as well. I do highly recommend checking this film out. This is, of course, the 4K UHD release. Next up is a Blu-ray release of the film called Long Shot. And this is, I think, one of the most underrated films of the year. It stars both Seth Rogen as well as Charlize Theron. And this is a wonderful rom-com, and it's a really solid film with a great script, great chemistry between the actors. I really found myself very much enjoying this film. Next up is a film that I really liked from last year, and this is the Blu-ray of Love, Simon. This is a film I saw in theaters. This is a film I did a review for here on the channel. This is another underrated film. It's a really beautiful film. It's based on a very popular New York Times bestseller, so I do highly recommend seeing this film as well. Next is a UHD 4K release of Fantastic Beasts: The Crimes of Grindelwald. This film is the newest film in the ever-growing Harry Potter franchise. This edition also contains an extended cut, which is about 7 or so minutes longer. I don't think it's going to do much to help the film in any way. I think the film needed a much longer cut than that. But please check out all of my thoughts on it on the individual review I did for it when it came out in theaters. Next up is a film by Steven Spielberg, and this is the 4K Ultra HD release of Ready Player One, based off of the really popular science fiction dystopian novel. I actually read the novel and watched the film. They are rather different, but kind of similar to one another. But please check out the review I did for this film as well, because I have some interesting thoughts on it, and I really do enjoy many of Steven Spielberg's work. This next one here is a bit of a catalog release, and it's a newer catalog release, and this is of Charlie's Angels. This is a film that came out in the early 2000s. This is a film I watched several times as a youngster, and this film, of course, stars Cameron Diaz, Drew Barrymore, Lucy Liu. This is directed by McG. This film is making its 4K UHD debut, and I believe its sequel, Charlie's Angels Full Throttle, was making its Blu-ray debut, which unfortunately it did not get a 4K UHD release to match up with this one, which is kind of unfortunate for collectors who like a certain sense of uniformity when it comes to their collections. Now, this next film actually has a sequel, and its sequel has already gotten a Blu-ray and 4K UHD release, which I haven't gotten yet, and this is of It. This is the first film which came out a few years ago, which was a big hit. I waited and waited to finally pick this up for a decent price, and I'm glad I actually did wait. I did rather enjoy this film. I did enjoy the sequel for the most part, but please check out my reviews for both this film as well as its sequel. And the next 4 Blu-rays that I have here are part of a 4 for $44 sale that Warner Archive was having on their website, and I do often take part in their sales because I really like their releases, and I really like picking up a couple of them when they do have sales like this, whether it be on their website, whether it be on Amazon. But the 4 that I ended up picking up are, first one here is John Frankenheimer's film 7 Days in May, a really brilliant political thriller that is rather contemporary when it comes to a lot of its political themes. Next here is a DVD to Blu-ray upgrade, and this is of Sidney Lumet's Running on Empty, which is a really underrated, solid film. I highly recommend getting this if you haven't seen the film already. There is a DVD release that is much older. I actually have a snapper case version of that DVD. That's how old that DVD actually is, so I'm looking forward to really watching it in a nice high-definition version. Next up here is a Blu-ray upgrade I've been waiting years to get. It's one that I'm so glad to finally add to this collection. I have the DVD, but this is a worthy upgrade, and this is The Horror of Dracula, starring the late, great Christopher Lee. This is part of the British Hammer Horror film line. I really like those films. They're really fascinating, and I have a certain goal to collect as many of them as I can, but I specifically want to get all of the Christopher Lee Dracula films. Christopher Lee as Dracula is just a really cool thing. This is probably the best out of the Christopher Lee Dracula films that I've seen so far, but I'm looking forward to adding more to the collection. And last but most certainly not least, and this is another film that I was looking forward to getting on Blu-ray because I was debating whether to pick up the DVDs. The DVDs have been available for years in various forms, but this is something I'm really hoping they release the rest of the films in this particular franchise, and this is, of course, The Thin Man. This is a fantastic classic film. There's a whole franchise of these films. There are, I believe, 6 of them. This is the first out of the 6 film. This, of course, stars Myrna Loy and William Powell as a kind of detecting sleuth couple. Great chemistry, interesting detective stories, really fun. There's a lot of comedy in it. I can't recommend this enough. See it any way you can. This is the only thing I ended up getting from Amazon.com during all of the Black Friday sales. And this is the Buster Keaton Collection Volume 1, which is put out by the Cohen Media Group. And this collection contains The General and Steamboat Bill Jr. And the reason why I picked this up is because I actually have no Buster Keaton at all in my collection. I've seen several of his films, but I've been waiting and thinking about which versions to get because there have been so many Blu-ray releases of his films. There were a lot of them released by Kino Lorber several years ago. There were collection sets, there were individual Blu-rays released. So far, the Cohen Media Group has released several of these collections, and I believe these collections here are done from new remasters that are different and better looking than the old Kino releases. That's kind of why I've been picking up these here. And I'm looking to pick up volumes 2 and 3 that are currently available, and I'm not quite sure when volume 4 is going to be available. Now comes the part of the video that all of you have been waiting for. well, I'm assuming many of you have been waiting for, and that is all of the Criterions that I picked up at the November 2019 Criterion sale at Barnes & Noble, and there are quite a few titles here, so let's dive into them. First up here is a Bette Davis film called Now Voyager. This is actually a DVD to Blu-ray upgrade for me, and I'm so glad that they decided to upgrade the DVD to the Blu-ray through Criterion, because this is a fantastic, fantastic film starring the great Bette Davis. This is a bit of a blind buy for me, and this is a documentary which is Muhammad Ali When We Were Kings, which famously chronicles the infamous fight between Muhammad Ali and George Foreman. Next is another Bette Davis title, and this is actually a rebuy for me. I have an older Blu-ray release of this, and this is one of her great films and great performances, and that is All About Eve. And the thing with this, there's a bit of a packaging problem with it, but I think I'm going to get into that when I do a much closer review of it, because I think it needs to be talked about in more depth. And this film here is a film that I'm sure many of you know. This is a film that I think is very much within Film School 101, and this is another John Frankenheimer film, and this is The Manchurian Candidate. And the reason why I bought this is because I have an older Blu-ray release that does have a much inferior transfer, so I wanted to get one with a much better transfer. This has a new 4K scan, and it looks absolutely fantastic. That black and white, lush looking aesthetic definitely translates very, very well. It also has a couple of new special features that I do want to save talking about for a much more in-depth review. Next is another DVD to Blu-ray upgrade, and this is actually a Criterion DVD to Blu-ray upgrade for me, and that is Brian De Palma's Sisters. This is a wild, crazy film, very Hitchcockian, but in a Brian De Palma sense, which is a lot of his 1970s and 80s work can be kind of summed up like that. But this is, of course, starring the late Margot Kidder. This is a film I do highly recommend if you're a Brian De Palma fan, if you want to get into his early work, into his pre-Scarface work, and you're kind of wondering what he was doing before then. Check out Sisters. Next is a film that I have waited years to get because I was actually debating whether to get the DVD or not, but I'm glad I waited for the Blu-ray release, and this is A Magnificent Obsession by Douglas Sirk. This stars Rock Hudson and Jane Wyman. This is a breakthrough film for Rock Hudson as an actor. It's a beautiful Technicolor film. It's a bit of a melodrama, which Douglas Sirk was very much known for, but I really, really love Douglas Sirk as a filmmaker, and I'm really glad that I get to add this film to the collection. This one here is a film by one of my all-time favorites, and I think an all-time great, and that is Charlie Chaplin, The Circus. This is a film, of course, from the silent era. Pretty much nearly his entire filmography is within the silent film genre, and this film is a really, really good film. It's a film that I've seen a couple of times, and I'm glad to add it to the collection. I'm glad to add just more Charlie Chaplin. I still need to get a bunch of his early pre-feature film short films that he did in the teens, and I'm really trying to get those collections within my overall collection because it's kind of a big thing I'm missing from his filmography. Next is a film by Ernst Lubitsch, and that is Clooney Brown. And I'm really glad I decided to release Clooney Brown because I really like Clooney Brown. I believe I recently watched it, I think within the last year or two, and I really enjoyed this film a lot. Criterion has put out a bunch of Ernst Lubitsch films. They put out an Eclipse set of Ernst Lubitsch films as well as a couple of Blu-rays, and this is another one to add to the Ernst Lubitsch section that I have within my collection, and I'm really glad I was able to get this because it came out just last month during the sale. It has a new 4K digital restoration I can't wait to watch. I also can't wait to discuss this film more, really discuss Ernst Lubitsch more on here on the channel because I don't think he's a director a lot of people know a lot about. The next film I have here is a bit of a blind buy for me, and the reason why it's a blind buy is because I've never heard of the film before, I've never seen the film before. The only reason I bought it is because I know who the director is, and this is Matewan, directed by John Sayles. I actually learned about John Sayles when I took a couple of film courses in college, and the professor was a really big fan of John Sayles. I actually think John Sayles was his favorite filmmaker, so he kind of told us a lot about John Sayles, and he actually showed us one of his films. Next film here is a film that is another blind buy. It's a film that I'm really glad to add to the collection because I'm always looking to add more silent films to the collection, and this is Hakan Sun. And this is a Swedish film that came out in 1922, and it's a film that's dealing about like devil worshipping and demons and witchcraft and all kind of cool, interesting things that I really want to check out in the silent movie form. And last, but certainly not least, when it comes to this crop of movies, this is something that when it was announced, I was so ecstatic and leaped for joy. And this is a film by just one of my favorite film people ever in the world of movies. And this is John Waters' Polyester. And yes, this film does come with the famous Odorama card that was with the original release. When you saw it in the theater, you had a scratch and sniff Odorama card. It's a bit of a gimmick that they've used a couple of times now, but this was a film that I think kind of used it for the first time. Don't quote me on that, but this film, of course, stars the late Divine as well as the late Tab Hunter, and I just love John Waters. I love him so much. I love just how he just doesn't care at all about what people think of him and his films. He's just out there and open, and man, I'm looking forward to getting all of his films in my collection. I have quite a few of them now, but I'm kind of waiting to see if the ones that are only on DVD are going to get Blu-ray releases eventually from somewhere. Right now, Criterion has put out a couple of them. They put out Female Trouble, they put out Multiple Maniacs, and now they put out Polyester. I would love if they put out Pink Flamingos. I would love to have a Criterion Pink Flamingos in my collection. And finally, we've come to the last thing in this never-ending haul, and it's probably the literal biggest thing that I've picked up possibly this year, definitely during the month of November, and I don't even know if it's going to fit in the frame, so I guess we'll find out. And this is the Godzilla, the Showa-era films collection. These are all of the Godzilla films that came out from 1954 to 1975. As you can see here, it is a rather large set. I have to lean all the way back. But what is so interesting about this set is that while it does appear large, literally, it is actually very, very thin. It is actually a bit of a digibook type style set, an oversized coffee table book type digibook. And I'm really going to save all of the details about it for a much necessary Blu-ray review. I'm going to go in depth about what is on all the discs, what are all the movies that are in here. If you are curious, there are quite a few films on here. It actually has 15 Godzilla films, and I'm actually so happy to have all of these in the collection because I was actually trying to collect all of them myself individually anyway. So if anything, this saved me a lot of time, saved me a lot of heartache just to get them all in one fell swoop. That has been my November 2019 haul video. It is a long haul video, kind of makes up for the last 2 months where I didn't have many things to show you, and it's definitely going to make up for what I have to show you next month, but please stick around for more Blu-ray reviews, more movie reviews, and all kind of stuff like that. If you're interested in any of the things that I have here, and you want me to talk about them a lot more, please let me know. I definitely plan on doing more Blu-ray reviews when it comes to 2020. That's something I've slacked on when it came to this year, and I'm really sorry for that. I kind of kept saying that I want to do them, but I never actually did. But 2020 is going to be a much more earnest effort in doing a lot more Blu-ray reviews because that's kind of where my main passion lies. So thank you all for watching, and please subscribe to this channel if you haven't already.